All right. Well, here is the plan. Best laid plans of mice and men, right? Here's our plan. Our plan this morning is to finish talking about providence of God. This doesn't mean that somewhere down the road we won't talk about it further and we won't have lessons on it. It just means for this time we're going to end it here. And the plan is, my plan is to start next week a study of the book of Ecclesiastes, a 12-chapter book, but it's heavy in philosophical ideas. And if you get time, or if it fits into your Bible reading this week, read it, and read it with, at least this first time, I'm going to ask you to read it a few different times in different ways. But read it this week with the idea of in search of happiness, Solomon's search for happiness. And then we're gonna look at it in two or three different lights, venues, different ways. And so, but that's how I want you, if you like, say, if you have time this week to read and to study it, to read it with that idea and see what you come up with. And all right, any announcements? Miss Ronelda is in the hospital. She was in room Friday. She was in room 558 at St. Thomas West. She did well through her surgery. So they're looking at getting her up and running around. But do remember her in your prayers. Oh, ooh. Okay, I hadn't heard. I hate that. Okay. Ooh.
And they're trying to. She's in hospital right now. They're trying to decide about surgery. Last I heard, they had.
Yeah. Terrible. Well, remember the Anderson family. Tough time. That just makes it more complicated anyway. Anything else or anybody else? Wonderful. From almost dead to that point. I didn't mean that ugly. It just, yeah. That's her sister-in-law. We've had on the prayer list. We've had her on the prayer list for a while, Miss Lucia. And anything else? So Miss Joyce, Miss Ronaldo, the Anderson family. All right, let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day, thankful for the opportunity that we have to approach you through the avenue of prayer, to spend, come and before the very throne that you sit upon, and to bring our cares and our concerns and our thoughts and our hopes, and ask you for the things that we need. And we come this morning, we're mindful of those that we just talked about that are going through. There's different ones with different situations, Miss Joyce and Miss Ronaldo, Miss Lucia, the Anderson family. Miss Anderson, we ask that you be with all of them, that you bless them. Each one has special needs, but we ask that you be with them and bless them and keep them. We ask that you watch over us as we go through a period of study this morning, that we'll study with the idea of seeing what we can learn and appreciate, and especially the lesson for the Bible school hour, that it will increase our faith. Watch over us, bless us, and keep us and hold us as we hold to you, for this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. All right, I want to begin this morning by just kind of reviewing some things. I think probably the most comforting and reassuring idea in the Bible, for me at least, is the fact that God watches over us. And I know there's a lot of, and you may have a different, yours may be the salvation of mankind and whatever it may be, and that's fine. But I think one of the most comforting ideas is the fact that we have a God, Father, who tenderly, lovingly, caringly, graciously watches over us, and who cares enough. You know, we live in a time, probably seemingly, at least to me, maybe not so, but seemingly to me, we live in a time in which we've grown to the idea of, I don't care about you, all I'm interested in is me. You know, that's why the guy behind you, driving behind you, flashes his lights or blows his horn. He wants you to get out of his way. We live in that kind of society. And so it's helpful to think that God knows me so well. You know, Matthew chapter 10, God knows the very number of hairs on your head. To know me that much, to care for me that much, it just is comforting and reassuring. And when you talk about the providence of God, in other words, as we define providence, we defined it as really the word literally means foresight. But it's the idea of God is over the governance of the nations, the universe, creation itself, and watches over it and takes care of it. Having defined it in that terms, and then we looked at several different ideas. But we talked about, if you look at point one, really that's a sort of a, if you will, sort of a capsule of what we have spent time in this study trying to establish. And that is that God, first of all, that he cares for us, that he does care, that we are of particular interest to him. And so he cares for us and he cares for our well-being. The second point is, and this is a big one as far as I'm concerned, that is God's in control. You know, we tend to think we're in control. We are the master of the universe, but not really. God is. God is in control. And I'm giving you verses. These are not new. Like I say, we've already studied this in this study for the last few weeks, and so we'll not go over all these right now. Thirdly, that God is present and he protects the righteous. What a great blessing that is to think that if we walk with him, he walks with us. He hears our prayers and he answers them. We talked about that last week, the fact that God hears our prayers. We can offer up a prayer and know, as James 5 says, when James 5 says, the effective fervent prayer of the righteous man avails much. And we didn't get into that last week, but the word avails there means works. It works much. Now you might say, well, can prayer really even affect God? Can it change the mind of God? Well, sure. First of all, let's understand God can change his mind. Go back to Jonah chapter 3, and Jonah goes to Nineveh. God's going to destroy Nineveh. Jonah preaches the gospel. Nineveh repents. God says, I'm not going to destroy them. Hezekiah was told, get your house in order for you're fixing to die, and he turned his face toward the wall, and he did what? Prayed to God, right? And he was spared 15 more years of life. So God hears our prayers. God answers our prayers. And we didn't really discuss this much last week because we had spent March talking on Sunday nights talking about prayer in our sermons. But God's answer sometimes is no. You see, we always think that God answers our prayers. Here's the things. Here's two of my long list of pet peeves, and that is that God doesn't answer my prayers when he tells me no, and that God will always be good when he answers my prayers the way I want. In other words, you hear people say, you know, God is good, but usually when do they say that? When something good has happened to them. And that's kind of where we're going to tie in here in just a few minutes. But understand that sometimes when bad things happen, as we'll see, like say, this is kind of the lesson for the day. When bad things happen to us, sometimes really that's for our good. I won't get into it, but you've heard me tell the stories of my mom used to take me out twice every service and waylay the daylights out of me. That's why I got to preaching. I got tired of getting whipped. And so, look, it was all good. It was all good. And so, those whippings were for a reason. And before Mom died, I would kid her about all the spankings I got, and she'd say, you didn't get enough. So, but we think about, well, God's good. Well, okay, he's always good. God's always good. He's always looking out for our best interest, even in the bad times and the hard times. So God answers our prayers. Next, we talked about how that He works. He works today through means of natural law. In other words, God does not perform a miracle in this day and age, but He does work. But He works through natural law. He allows for the freedom of mankind. We have the ability to pick and choose. One author, I really like the way he said it. He basically said, God puts before us choices. And when we make the wrong choice, He still puts before us choices. And it often, when the author said that, it reminded me of my wonderful wife. Sometimes we go out every Friday night to eat. That's our night out. And so sometimes, well, I learned a long time ago. I learned within the first 3 months of being married that I quit picking Friday nights where we were going to eat. And so she picks. And so sometimes, because she gets tired of picking, she'll say, well, you can either pick between this place or this place. And so I pick one, and she says, nope, that's not where we're going. Well, why did I have a choice? Well, I was hoping you'd choose the right one, is usually what she says. I said, well, I really don't care, so it doesn't matter to me. But God gives us the freedom of will, the freedom to pick to choose. And sometimes we make wrong decisions. Sometimes we make bad choices. That doesn't mean God can't still work all that out to the way that He is for our good. Next, God has an ideal will and supreme desire, our salvation. That's the good. Remember that. We think that Romans 8:28 passage means, guess what? We're going to have big bank account, big house, big car, and everything goes along with it, all the trappings. As far as God is concerned, the good for us is the salvation of mankind. That's the good that God is trying to work for. Next, God operates within His nature and revealed will. We talked about the righteousness of God, the holiness of God, and how that God has to operate within those means. And then next, I threw this in just to make sure you caught it. I probably should have left it out, but anyway, because we've already discussed it. But God works behind the scenes. God works behind the scenes. All right, having said that, and that's kind of a review. That's kind of where we've been, what we've gone through. I ask you to think about those things. But here comes a problem. When you look at all of that, and here's the problem. If God is for us, why in His infinite care does He allow us to suffer? That's the question. This is the question that the atheist brings up. He brings up and I'm not saying you're atheist if you think this. Let me finish. The atheist says, if there was a God, He would not allow His children to suffer. And so therefore, the atheist mind says there is no God. The agnostic says, I'm not sure there's a God. Could be one. But it makes a lot of sense that if there was one, we wouldn't suffer. The Christian, let's move on. We could go through a lot of different groups. But the Christian says, I have difficulty understanding why I, as a Christian, understanding that God protects, God provides, God watches, that God would allow me to suffer. God would allow me to have pain. God would allow me to hurt. God would allow me to go through terrible situations. Why would God allow me to go through cancer? Why would God allow my loved one to lay in bed and suffer for a long time? Why would God, if He loves me and He really cares for me, why would He allow bad things to happen to me? Business to go broke, cars to be wrecked, financial situation not to be the way it should be. Why would God allow me to do that? And why would God allow that to happen? And that's the question. And when you begin, let me say this, when you begin to feel that way, first of all, I want you to know you're normal. You're normal. Second of all, when you begin to feel that way, don't think that you have monopoly on your own problems. Everybody has problems. Thirdly, when you begin to feel that way, Go read the book of Psalms. You might say, well, where's the best place to start? Chapter 1, verse 1. Blessed is the man that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law. And in that law he meditates day and night. Now, as you get on into it, you might say, well, how about reading the 13th Psalm? How about reading the 37th Psalm? How about reading the 139th Psalm? And you'd hit, those are good ones. But I can honestly say, if you just start Psalm 1 and just start reading and thinking about, because so many of the Psalms, the psalmists, especially the ones that David wrote, starts out literally, if you will, not literally, but figuratively, but shaking his fist in the face of God and say, why did you allow this to happen? Why did this happen? I don't understand. But then there's a flip somewhere in that psalm. Usually it starts with the word but. And he says, but I see what you did. I see what's going on. I understand your care. I understand your love. And so that's a great place to start. But still, we question the idea of suffering. Well, let's understand, first of all, why do we suffer? I'm giving you really 4 different reasons why you might, and all of us might suffer. First of all, wrong personal choices. Giving you a couple of passages there, but the idea of the Christian suffers. How about 1 Peter chapter 4? Peter makes the statement there in verse 15, let none of you suffer as a murderer or as a thief or as an evildoer or as a busybody in other man's matters. If any man suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed. Notice what he says. Notice that he uses the same word. He says, don't suffer as a murderer. But then he goes on to say, but if you suffer as a Christian, the idea of suffering. God did not remove the idea of suffering from Christian. And sometimes we make wrong personal choices. And because of the choices that we've made, we suffer. Sometimes we suffer because of the wrong choices of others. Somebody else has made the choice and we've had to suffer. And I've given you some examples. Abel, Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a great example to me. All Jeremiah did was preach the truth. And all Jeremiah did was get laughed at by people, thrown into a cistern, all these problems that Jeremiah, go back and read the book of Jeremiah, all the problems that Jeremiah went through. And all Jeremiah was trying to do was lead the people back to God. That's all he was trying to do. He suffered, but he suffered because of the wrong choices of others, because of the fact that people didn't want to hear what he had to say. And so sometimes we suffer because of the wrong choices of others. Sometimes we suffer because of the choices of former generations. And I've listed there disease, death. There are things that happen to us. Death. We've talked about death here just recently on Sunday night. We talked about in that series when we all get to heaven. Excuse me. We talked about dying. That's not a pleasant subject, but we understand that death come upon all men. Why? Because of Adam and Eve. Because of their sin, cast out of the garden, not being able to access the tree of life. And so we all die. We all die because of the wrong choices of former generations. And then we suffer because of just natural law. If you like to fly, wonderful. But you do know planes come down. It's called gravity. And sometimes they come down when they're not scheduled to, or it's not time for them to come down. Those are called crashes. You find that out in cars. If the fellow behind you makes the wrong choice, doesn't stop. Suzanne and I we were coming down Charlotte Friday night. We'd been to eat and we were going shopping, and so as we were coming down the road, I caught them out of the corner of my eye. 2 cars coming out from Nashville West, and as one stopped because I was coming, the next one behind them I thought stopped. Suzanne said it didn't stop. Said it hit the car. Wrong choice. See, that the person that got hit is now going to have to go through all this rigmarole. Why? Because of the bad choice of somebody else. But suffering, why? Because of natural law. You hit something, what does it cause? A dent, right? Problem. And so those are kind of the reasons why we suffer. Well, that still doesn't help me. Well, let's understand that there are benefits in suffering. That's where I want us to head right now. Any questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions? We're kind of flying through this, but there's a reason. We're going to try to bring it all together. Okay, so what are the benefits of suffering? As I said a while ago, I got a lot of spankings. And my mother did admit, talking about my mother, my sweet mother, my mother did admit that she said, when you were young, I really thought you ought to sit perfectly still. And at that time, I was probably in my 50s. And I said, Mom, that's why I'm preaching, because I still can't sit still during a sermon. And she said, I know. But it didn't help the situation. Well, I didn't appreciate those spankings at the time. But now when I look back on them, I'm thankful for most of them. When we go through life, I'm not going to ask you, but think of a specifically difficult time in your life. Some of us were talking out in the lobby a while ago. Suzanne and I was talking about the cars that we've had, and the first car we bought. My wife did not, the dowry that you get when you marry your wife. You know what? My wife came with nothing, no car, no nothing. She had to have a car because she still had student teaching to do, and so we had to get a car. And so we spent 3 or 4 weeks, weekend Saturdays during the week, trying to find a car for her. And the car we eventually found and could afford and bought turned out to be one big, huge lemon. Sucked up, what extra money we were making at the time. And of course, Suzanne said, then the next year, I had a good job. We bought a car. Actually, here's the thing. Ask Suzanne, what was the first major purchase you made when you became a school teacher? You know what she'll tell you if she's thinking clearly? Color TV. Tells you about our priorities, doesn't it? We bought one of those big old monsters that sit in the middle of the floor. Sears and Roebuck, proud of it. You couldn't, never mind. But we go through those difficult times in our life, whatever they may be. Sickness, finances, sickness of a mate, parents sickness, parents going through trauma. We go through those times and we really ask ourselves, what is the benefit for it? And I'll say this, I don't think going through it, we see the benefit of it. But I think when we look back on it, when we're able to look back on it, we are able to see, well, yeah, there was some good. And I want to throw these things out and really just stir your thinking more than anything. But what are some of the benefits of our suffering? First of all, it reminds us of our role and at the same time reminds us of God and who he is in our life. Reminds us God's in control. We see things and things happen to us and we want to know, where is God in all of this? What happened to him? Why is he so silent? Why is he so quiet? Why isn't he assisting us? Why isn't he doing something for us? But then we take a step back and we realize, yeah, but you're the one that's in control, God. You're the one that's, while I make the decisions and I have the choices that you put in front of me, you're still in control. And that's a great, if you will, awakening to remember that. And so one of the benefits is to remember, to be reminded of who we are and who God is. Because usually, and not so much with Christians, because we deal with this so much in trying to figure out things, but the world, look at the world. When do they slow down? And when do they think about God? When something bad happens. And usually, as long as it's good and going along well, God's in their mind, but they don't think about it. And so one of the benefits is that reminds us of the role. And then what happens then? Well, it can draw us to God. Suffering, secondly, can draw us to God. Look in Psalm 18 in verse 6. In Psalm 18, by the way, Psalm 18 is also found two other places in the Bible. But Psalm 18, verse 6, David, the psalmist, says, "In my distress, I called upon the Lord and cried out to my God. He heard my voice from his temple, and my cry came before him, even to his ears." David said, I was having problems, and I cried to God. Now he begins, "The Lord's my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, my high tower, in whom I will trust," right? But in my distress, I cried unto the Lord. Well, there, first of all, is a fitting place to go when we are in distress, right? Where could I go? Where could I go? Seeking refuge for my soul, needing a friend, right? Who's that? God. God. Can't go a lot of times to the world. The world can't help us, but we can go to God. And so suffering helps draw us closer to God because we begin to realize who He is. We begin to realize His role, and we're drawn to Him. Suffering, thirdly, helps us see the real worth of things. What we value sometimes is not what we value all the time. We value some things and we find out, they're fine, but they're not as good as really maybe we think they are. A story is told of a man that is in a restaurant eating, and he gets something, he swallows wrong, and he gets something lodged in his throat, and he can't breathe. And so there's a doctor that's sitting the next table over, realizes what's going on, and so he jumps up and he grabs the man, and he performs the Heimlich on the man. Guy shoots that thing. "Oh, thank you. I thought I was going to die right here. What can I?" And the doctor give up. Well, a lot of truth to that. What would I give? Have you ever used that expression? Have you ever said, "What would I give for or to?" Well, suffering helps us really in that it sees the worth of things. Suffering next helps us, it prepares us to be compassionate towards others who suffer. We all suffer at one time or another. But Paul reminds us in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, he talks about suffering, and he says that we may be able to comfort those. You see, today I'm not suffering. Personally, I can say that. Tomorrow I may be. Hope not, but tomorrow I may be. Next month I may be. Suzanne went for her physical Wednesday, and the doctor looked at her and said, "You hadn't had your single shot." And I'm thinking he's on a kick because he told me that a month ago. You have to have two. And so anyway, I had really thought that Suzanne and I would just do them together at the same time. But, she likes to jump gun. And so he said, "You want yours today?" And she said, "Sure." And so his nurse gave her her first of two shingle shots. Her arm was very sore then Wednesday night. Her arm was very sore on Thursday. And Friday, when we got up, she said, "My arm's still very sore." She said, "Now that's a side effect that they told me." I said, "My arm's still very sore." I said, "You are really just encouraging me to get mine." And so then Friday night, we stopped by where we were shopping in the pharmacy, and she said, "Can he get a shingle shot?" Yes. So I filled out the paperwork, and the pharmacist gave me my first of two shingle shots. And you know what they tell you? Has everybody had theirs? I would recommend getting it because I have visited enough people with shingles. You don't want shingles. But anyway, the lady said, "Now your arm will probably be sore. You might have even a little inflammation. You might have some headache, and you might have something else." And I said, "Oh, goody." And she said, She said, so I said, well, my wife just had hers Wednesday. And I said, her arm is very sore. She said, yeah. And so when I got out, I told Suzanne, I said, you know what she told me? What? I said that only the mean people have sore arms. It must be true because my arm has not, it's been a little bit sore, but not much. I've had flu shots that have hurt worse. But you know, we suffer, and we have to understand that suffering really helps us to say, okay, I feel for you. I feel with you. I'm sorry that you're going through this, and understand what's going on. I think I know I did. I told you about a friend of mine, preacher friend, actually done a little mentoring to him, but his son back in this summer, well, back May, right before school was out. Yeah, 3 days before school was out, 2 days before school was out, he took his own life. And the death of a mate versus a father is completely different. But my dad died in '06, and I still have times. And if Steve sings certain songs, I'm all for him leading them. Don't get me wrong, but because they were Dad's favorites, it tear me up. Sometimes it gets hard to preach for a few minutes. I get over it though. But you know, we understand that suffering helps us help others go through their situation. Suffering also helps us to remember this earth's not our home. I don't want to stay here forever. Do you? You want to stay here forever? Not the way it is now, or ever has been. I mean, when you think about the pain, the heartache, the hurt, the disappointment, the trials, yeah, there are good times. You know, we're keying on suffering today. Let's understand there are good times, and by and large in our life, if you really analyze it, the good times are lengthier than the bad times. The bad times seem to be and tend to be more intense because the good times are what we often just refer to as every day. Just every day. You know, today's a good day. I'm smiling. I'm upright. I'm above ground. I had a preacher friend of mine that when you'd say, well, how are you today? He'd say, I'm above ground. That's all he'd say. Walk off. It's like, okay. But suffering helps us understand this world's not our home. As the song goes, we're just passing through. Our treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. Yes, we're not home yet. And suffering helps us to understand we're not home, and I don't want this to be my home. But I have a home that's awaiting me. I have a home that's prepared for me, and that's the home I want to go to. That's the home I want to be in eternity. Then next, suffering enhances our ability to pray. Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Suffering helps us to understand that. Look in Luke chapter 22, verse 44. It says, and remember, Jesus is in the garden, and being in agony, he prayed. There's not a period there. Look at what it says. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, which implies what? He'd already been praying about this. He had a good prayer life, Jesus. Of course he did. But being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Then his sweat came like great drops of blood falling down to the ground. Being in agony, he prayed. Suffering usually causes us to turn to God in prayer. But then let me add one more right quick. Suffering polishes us. And this is the one that probably when we're going through suffering that folks don't want to hear. But it actually polishes us. You ever sharpened a hoe or a shovel? Bought a shovel a few years ago, didn't have an edge to it. It was brand new. They don't put edges on brand new shovels. And so I started back in the early part of this year. I hadn't touched it in a long time, but putting an edge to it, taking a file and putting an edge to the shovel. Y'all didn't know a preacher could do that, right? Did you know a preacher could do that? Never met one that could do it. Oh, I've got an edge on this one. So I like to have an edge on them when I use them because I'm an edgy person. No. Yeah. Yeah, it's living on the edge, isn't it? There's a song should be there. But when you do that, it takes a good file and it takes a certain amount of time. Know-how, nah. I mean, you probably do. I don't have a lot of know-how. I do know how to do it, but not a great deal of know-how. But each stroke of that file polished up that edge a little bit, made it sharper. I reckon suffering of this present time is not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in heaven. Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8. Paul would talk about it's the trying of our faith, James chapter 1, that produces patience. You see, it polishes us up. It gets us ready, gets us more refined. Now, having said all that, let me tell you, I don't like suffering. I don't like the dark times in my life. I didn't like going through them. I did not, and still don't, and I know I'll have more. I don't like them. So don't walk away and say, well, that preacher's half crazy. He's talking about all the benefits of suffering. I'm saying these are things that come out of our suffering. But suffering is real. And suffering is something we go through. And suffering hurts. Suffering brings mental anguish and pain. It brings tears. It brings great emotion. But you see, in all of that, we wonder, where's God? And the reassurance is that God's watching. That God is taking care of us. That God is going to make sure that it all comes out. I may not always see that. I may not always like that. I think I shared with you this statement when we were in the process of looking this time. Of course, we've looked a few other times, but we were in the process of looking for congregation. Didn't think we were so old and crepit we couldn't work. and thank you that you don't think that. But I was talking to a missionary, and I had known him for a long time, or for quite a while, a few years. And he said something about, well, brother, I hope you find a congregation soon. And I said, I will. I'll find one. God just hadn't got it ready yet. When I said that, I believed that. But let me tell you, those were dark days. Those were dark days when you're doing something that is fine and you're being able to accomplish, but it's not what you want to do. And you're in that moment of wonder. What's going to happen next? When's the next shoe going to fall? What's the next problem going to be? Is the sun ever going to shine again? Is it ever going to be brighter today or tomorrow than it is today? We don't like suffering. But know that that's polishing on you to get you better. Anything else along that line before we kind of bring it all to a circle? Well, explain God's providence during our suffering. I wish I could. I really wish I could. Now, I've given you several things there, and I want to run through them, but I think this is probably the most challenging of thoughts. I think it's one of those that where words really try to comfort, and they're the best things that we can to comfort. They're the best things we have that can help us comfort others. But sometimes words are so hollow. And so I realize that what I'm about to propose may seem very hollow to you, but it may be the best that I can do at this point in time. We know that neither innocence nor virtue exempts us from bitter trials. When it seems as if God has utterly forsaken us, he's really near us, steadily working out his gracious ends. I may not understand it. I may not get it. I may not agree with it. I may not want to go through it. I may not enjoy it. But I understand that God is still there, that God is in control, and God is working it all out. By faith, I trust in God's providential control. And I don't have time, but I'd like for you to read this week, when you're reading Ecclesiastes, turn over and read Psalm 13. Because David reminds us, he says, where were you? Where were you? And then he says, I know you were near. I know you were close, and I'm paraphrasing there. But remember that suffering works good. It works good things within us. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 5. And it'll never get so great. God has promised that it'll never get so great that we can't bear it. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. God is faithful. Now, you can look at the other part of that verse, and the other part of that verse is so reassuring. He will not allow you to be tempted above what you are able to bear, is another way of translating that phrase there in the Greek text. But will with temptation provide a way of escape, that you may be able to bear it. God will provide. Why? Because God is faithful. And so, while it may be great, and you may say, I don't know that I can go another day. Yeah, you can. And God will make sure of that. Remember then the promises of God, and that he's faithful to his promises. He keeps his promises. I was going to read the Hebrews 6 passage. Let's just read the Hebrews 10:23 passage. We don't have a lot of time. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. There's your hope. There's your reasoning. There's what you hold on to in the midst of your difficulties. I came across back, this is day. Oh, good night. I didn't realize it'd been this long. 2001. It was a speech by Billy Smith given at Freed-Hardeman Lectures. Billy Smith, at that time, Billy would have been head of the Bible department at Freed-Hardeman. He was a teacher of mine, an undergraduate and graduate. Billy is a fantastic guy. He retired last year from Freed-Hardeman. But Billy has lessons from God's providence. And sometime I'd like to expound on some of these, but he talks about that the greatest thing about a man is what he believes, that a man's beliefs molds his character and determines his behavior. Every man's life can be a plan of God. All things work together for good. That no matter the cost, truth is always right. That it's possible to be pure and resist temptation even as a youth. That God doesn't forget man when man doesn't forget God. That he that is humble will be exalted, that it's better to go to prison with God, and this is coming from the story of Joseph now, but it's better to go to prison with God than to live in the palace with sin, and that it is best to begin early with God and remain faithful all the days of your life. And then, in the lecture that I heard him as he presented this, he added number 11. He says, faith in the future is better than fear of the future. Yeah, Billy's a good guy. He's a smart guy. He's a guy I love, appreciate dearly. Sometime I may take that and work that into a sermon and expound upon that. But those are great thoughts to think with regards to God's providence. I'll be honest. I struggle with God's providence. I appreciate it. I love it. I'm thankful for it. I believe that it is true. Don't get me wrong. But I struggle because why I'm human, but I struggle with it in those deep, dark, difficult times. Because here's the question I have. How am I going to know which road to take? And how and when is all of this going to work out? See, I'm a guy that I'm part analytical. And I can sit back and I can analyze things. God made me that way. And it's served me well. But I can sit back and I can analyze things. And sometimes it just doesn't all compute. But I remember what Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. We walk by what? Faith and not by sight. So thanks be to God that he helps us through our difficult times. Now, having said that, if you're having difficulty, if I can help you in any way, or any of the other members can help you, but if I can help you, please let me know. Please call me, text me, email me, whatever you need. Just come and we'll talk and see what we can come up with. Anything else? Well, let's bow. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this day. We're thankful that you've allowed us to see it. So thankful that you've blessed us in so many different ways with the things that are going on in our life. We're thankful that we have health and strength, that we're able to be at church this morning to worship you. And we ask that worship that we're about to participate in, that it will be beneficial, that it will be uplifting, that it will be encouraging, but that it will also truly praise and honor you. We ask that you be with us as we believe and we trust in your providence and your care, but sometimes we struggle with it. We ask that you help us in our struggles, that you give us the strength that we need to get through them, and that we will truly see your hand in our lives. We ask that you watch over us, bless us, and keep us, and hold us as we hold to you. For this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Y'all have a great week. Thank y'all.